You look up at the night sky and see a handful of bright dots scattered across black fabric. Maybe you recognize Orion. Maybe the Big Dipper. That's about it. The rest is just static. You don't need to know more. Your phone has a compass, your car has GPS, and your watch tells you when the seasons change. That sky is decorative now. But for nearly all of human history, reading that ceiling wasn't a hobby. It was survival. The sky was the first calendar, the first clock, the first map, and the first storybook your ancestors ever owned. They could read it the way you read a sentence. They knew the date by where the sun rose. They knew the hour by where the stars sat. They knew when to plant, when to migrate, when the rains were coming, and when the rivers would flood. They knew which stars would guide them home, and which ones meant death. We have lost almost all of that. Not because we're less intelligent. Because we outsourced it. And the price of outsourcing is that we no longer see what's right above us. Let's start with the most basic layer. Before agriculture, before cities, before writing, before any human had ever heard the word calendar, the sky was already keeping time. The sun didn't just tell you when to wake up. It told you where you were in the year. If you watched the horizon every morning, you would notice that the sun doesn't rise in the same place. In winter, it rises far to the south. In summer, it rises far to the north. Halfway between, at the equinoxes, it rises due east. A prehistoric observer could track the sun's movement along the horizon and know within a few days when the growing season would begin or when the cold would hit. They didn't need numbers. They needed a stick in the ground and the patience to watch. This is the most ancient form of astronomy. It's called horizon astronomy, and it predates writing by tens of thousands of years. The earliest known solar calendar is carved into a bone from the Dordogne region of France, dated to roughly 15,000 years ago. It marks the phases of the moon. 15,000 years ago, someone was counting days by carving notches into a piece of bone. That's not a caveman grunting. That's a scientist. Then there's the moon. The moon is even more obvious. It cycles every 29.5 days. That's a unit of time anyone can count. The word month comes from moon. That's not an accident. Every human culture on Earth has tracked the moon. Some used it to mark the passage of seasons. Some used it to time hunting. Some used it to structure religious ceremonies. But the moon was tricky for agriculture. Because the lunar year is about 11 days shorter than the solar year, which means the moon drifts through the seasons. If you plant by the moon alone, you'll plant too early or too late every few years. So the ancients learned to sync both. The sky wasn't just a clock. It was a system, and they figured it out. But the real magic is in the stars, because the stars do something that neither the sun nor the moon can do. They hold still, the sun moves, the moon moves, the planets move, but the stars, relative to each other, are fixed. They are reference points in a shifting world. If you know the pattern of the night sky at a given time of year, you can navigate with nothing else. This was a world before compasses, before maps, before road signs. The Pacific Islanders navigated thousands of miles of open ocean using nothing but the stars, the waves, and the behavior of birds. They had no instruments. They had no written charts. They held the entire map of the Pacific in their heads, a map made of stars. The stars told them where they were going, and where home lay. And they did this for generations so long that their knowledge predates the pyramids of Egypt. The Polynesian expansion across the Pacific is one of the great human achievements, and it was done entirely with naked-eye astronomy. The sky was their GPS. But the sky wasn't just a tool, it was a story. The oldest stories still told on Earth are star stories. The ancient Greeks, the Aboriginal Australians, the Maya, the Inuit, the Chinese, all of them saw different pictures in the same stars. And those pictures were never just arbitrary. They were memories. They were warnings. They were laws. The constellations encoded everything that mattered. The position of certain stars told you when to harvest. The heliacal rising of Sirius signaled the flooding of the Nile. That was the most important event in Egyptian agriculture. They didn't have a calendar on the wall. They had a star that told them exactly when to move. In Aboriginal Australian culture, the stars were part of the landscape itself. They were woven into the dreaming, the creation stories that governed every aspect of life. A person could look at the sky and see their ancestral history written in light. The stars were not a distant abstraction. They were the closest thing to a holy text. We have lost the ability to read any of this. Most people alive today cannot name more than a handful of constellations. Almost none can navigate by the stars. Almost none can tell you the date by the position of the sun, and this loss is recent, extremely recent. As recently as 200 years ago, most humans living on Earth could still do some version of this. Farmers knew the sky. Sailors knew the sky. Shepherds knew the sky. Night travel was common enough that people had to know where they were going. The sky was the wallpaper of daily life. And then the Industrial Revolution happened. We moved indoors. We installed electric lights. We stopped looking up. Today, more than 80% of people on Earth live under light-polluted skies. In some parts of the world, the Milky Way is no longer visible. A child born in a city today will never see the galaxy with their own eyes unless someone takes them somewhere dark. That's not a metaphor. That's physical reality, and it has consequences. Light pollution doesn't just hide the stars. It severs the connection between the human animal and the rhythms of the planet. Your sleep cycle is no longer tied to the setting of the sun. Your sense of the year no longer depends on the solstice. You know when winter is coming because the calendar app tells you, not because you saw the sun drop below a certain mountain peak. And your brain didn't evolve for that. The human brain has specialized circuits for spatial awareness and visual processing. Those circuits were honed by millions of years of navigating a world where the sky was always visible. But those circuits are plastic. If you don't use them, they weaken. They don't disappear, but they dull. And when you dull a circuit that evolved over millions of years, you don't just lose a party trick. You lose a piece of your humanity. But here's the weird part. You still have that ability. It's still inside you. Your brain can still read the sky if you train it. The patterns are there. The relationships are there. The geometry is there. You just have to look. A 2013 study published in the journal Cognition found that people can learn to navigate by the stars in just a few weeks of focused training. The brain rewires itself quickly when the task matters. The neural architecture is still there. It's dormant. It's not dead. And that says something important about who we are. We are the species that read the sky. We are the species that looked up and found meaning. We are the species that turned stars into maps and myths and calendars and clocks. That didn't happen once. It happened everywhere. Every human culture that ever existed did this. That means reading the sky is not a quirk of one civilization. It's a human universal. It's as natural as speaking or making tools. It's part of the toolkit you inherited from every ancestor you've ever had. What you do with that toolkit is up to you. You can ignore the sky. You can never learn a single constellation. You can go your whole life without ever seeing the Milky Way. Plenty of people do. But if you do, you are living a thinner life than your ancestors lived. You are disconnected from a layer of reality that every human who ever lived before you knew intimately. You are walking through a world that is more mysterious than you realize because you have forgotten how to read its most ancient text. The sky is still there. The stars are still there. They haven't gone anywhere. The sky is still waiting to be read. The only question is whether you'll ever learn.